You, Elliot. Elliot's our second vice chair, so thank you for what you're doing. I'd like to recognize visitors, and there are a lot of them, so I'm just going to go to the officers that I know. We have Dan Harvell, the chairman of Anderson County Republican Party. Stand up, Dan. Not the Harvell you see the cartoons in the newspaper sometime. That's his cousin, right? But he does a good job. Media, I saw Ron Burnett. Any other media here? Okay, good to have you, Ron. Thanks for coming. Elected officials, I saw Inslee Feemster, who's on council over here. You moved on me. And Neil Smith, the on county council, was here. Is he gone? He must have left. He had to leave, okay. And Henry Wilson, school board. And Rick Clark, our sheriff, was here, but he's gone to get a projector that Diane needs because I miscommunicated with her about the projector, and I apologize. So we got that squared away. Are there any presidential candidate representatives? I saw TJ somewhere. We have two. Would you all like to say just a word, introduce yourself? Go ahead and do that. Good to have y'all with us. Debbie, you want to come down here? Thank you, Debbie. And Jeff, are you doing Trump?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Willis. I'm Pickens County Chairman for Donald Trump. We don't really have anything going on in Pickens County right now. I know the event's still scheduled for Anderson. They moved it to the Coliseum.
Civic Center. Okay, good. Thank you for the projector, Rick. Our sheriff has arrived, and I apologize to impose on you. We'll set that up. Can we have a few minutes to set it up now, or you want to? Okay. We're still waiting on Tara. She's apparently lost. Oh, she's here. Hey. I was looking for Rick. I knew he went out searching for you. So give us just a minute to catch your breath, and we'll get the projector fired up. Where's your laptop, Diane? Oh, it's there. Okay. Rick is a jack of all trades. He can be sheriff and IT guy. So, Rick Tate, where's Rick? Oh, right here. I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to introduce our guests and kind of take it from here. After the speakers, we have just a little bit of business the executive committee would need to stay for, but visitors could leave after that if they wanted to. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Rick Tate, and first, recently, somebody made a statement that we conservatives, a small group, were against everything, which I find a little funny. But to show you what we are for, I believe in the box up here, is that where they're at? We have copies of the South Carolina State GOP party platform. That is what we are for. And if you look at it, you'll find that everything is based in free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, national security, and traditional values. That is conservative. That is what conservative means when I say I am a conservative. Tonight, oddly enough, in a county setting, we're going to talk about national security. That's what all this is rooted in with the refugee problem. Or I see it as a problem anyway. And that young lady sitting right back there, Tara Servatius, is about as passionate about it as anybody I know. I have the pleasure of arguing with her every morning, or a lot of mornings, about 6:30. So Tara is a award-winning investigative reporter. I first started listening to her in Charlotte. Being a truck driver, I used to get up that way a good bit. And when she very first started in talk radio, and that's been a few years ago, very good. And she had the people in Mecklenburg County stepping lightly. And she has a reputation of once she gets on something to dig to the bottom and get to the truth. That's the reason we invited her here tonight. Tara, would you like to come and...
Before she said, I forgot to do something. You can come on down. I wanted to clear something up. I sent you all an email earlier this week, and I've been called a lot of things, including a liar, but I try not to lie, and that's the one thing I'd rather not be called. But I sent you a note that this was being forced on us by the federal government. And thanks to John L., who sent me an email today with a 50-page plan, and I had no knowledge of this plan, but there is a state plan for refugee resettlement, and it's actually, the state applied for this. Excuse me? Okay. It is signed by Nikki Haley, by the way, and several other people. So I wanted to clear that up, and I wanted to read you something here to kind of tee it up. I hope I don't take your thunder, but this starts off, in order for the state to receive refugee resettlement assistance from funds appropriated under Section 414 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, I assume that's some sort of federal law, it must submit to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, a plan that meets the requirements of Title V of the Act to the state plan of the Act. This state plan has been prepared in compliance with this requirement detailed in 45 CFR 400.4. So I wanted to clear that up. It appears it's kind of like Common Core. Janelle and I talked earlier. It appears the federal government maybe waved some money in front of us and said, if you do this, we'll give you this. So that's a real problem for us. And these ladies, Diane Hardy and Stacy Mae and Tara, are going to go into a lot of details on it. That's about all I know about it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. All right. They don't have this on short people setting, do they? That's good. That's good. All right. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me this evening. By now, I'm normally in bed, so if I'm a little loopy, please forgive me because I'm on a different time schedule than most people are. But I very much appreciate. Where's John L.? Who is John? You are John L. Oh, thank you so much. You have sent me so many emails. You do so much. I just wanted to see who you are. And okay, thank you for inviting me this evening. I'm going to go ahead and set this for. For about 10 minutes. I don't want to take up all of your time here tonight. I'm going to try to weave a couple of different things together. The presidential election, the refugee situation here in South Carolina, which is not unique to the state, and particularly from a national security perspective. Also the refugee situation nationally and the illegal immigrant situation nationally from a political perspective, and then finally kind of end it with the presidential election. So, and then maybe open the floor for some questions, hopefully. I'm going to start, I think, with the refugee situation and then work my way out. How many people remember the Charlie Hebdo commercials, the cartoons, and the fallout of that, and that was really terrible. You remember what that was like. And that kind of was a clash of two civilizations, a Western civilization and one that doesn't share its values. But that's fallen from the newspapers, and we've all finally kind of forgotten about it, and I think we're all sort of thinking about it as well. It's an isolated incident in France. And nobody's really thinking about what France is like right now. On January 11th, the French government had to put 10,000 soldiers on the streets. That's in addition to the police that would normally patrol. For 3 months it took them to keep control of the streets, particularly areas, Fox News called them no-go zones. They were heavily Muslim. That's a fact. I wish it weren't so, but they are. They were. You could call them what they want, but they were out of control. Now, before Charlie Hebdo happened, it took a military force of 3,000 permanent on the streets to protect the synagogues and religious sites from attack by Muslims. They had to go to 10,000 after Charlie Hebdo. So round about April, Francois Hollande decided that the military was cracking under this. They were not meant for this, and so he decided he would go to a permanent security force of only 7,000 to maintain control in the country. When your military has to patrol your streets with big, heavy firearms, fully armed, beyond what your police provide, there's two words for what that is, and that's a police state. And that's what they have to live in France right now. Before the EU decided to begin taking these refugees into the camps, you've probably read a lot about what's been going on in Europe. You've heard a lot about it. The UK itself had gotten to a saturation point where it had begun to lose control of certain boroughs and neighborhoods as well. They were having other problems that have come with the clash of the civilizations and the disinterest, I guess, in integrating between the two civilizations. And so they had begun to pass some pretty innovative laws in terms of actually enforcing, keeping illegal immigrants from illegally participating in their societies, like announcing that they would begin to go after landlords who did not check and, gave sanctuary to illegal immigrants. Things like that for Europe would have been unimaginable. Unfortunately, the EU overrode that. So what we have right now is a situation where in February, ISIS announced that they were going to be sending a 500,000 strong fighting force to Europe, disguised as refugees. This is very well covered in Europe. This is not a secret. This was, you read about it in the Telegraph, Google it when you get home. It was very widely covered in European media. And then it was kind of forgotten and brushed off. And lo and behold, around last month, how many show up? They think between 500,000 and 800,000. How did ISIS say they'd come disguised as refugees? What are they? 80% male. You take the pictures of the Yazidis who have, I put this up on Facebook, who have fled ISIS, and it's a lot of women and children because they killed the men. And you take a picture, you look at the picture of these refugees, it's all men. It's a stark contrast. So where did we go? Where did they go? What did they do with them? They sent them to the EU refugee camps, the UN refugee camps in the EU. Those are the same refugee camps they're going to be pulling our Syrian refugees out of to send them here. The UN makes the decisions about who comes here to the United States of America. Now, obviously, the Homeland Security Department vets them and background checks them, allegedly. And I know Diane and Stacy will get into some of that if you haven't already this evening. But they allegedly are vetted. There's our own James Comey, head of the FBI, has just come out this past week, in fact, and said, actually, I can't vet them. I don't have the databases to do it. I don't have the background information. So the UN is going to be pulling from those very refugee camps that you are seeing and reading about and bringing these folks to the United States of America. We know we're going to get at least 20,000 extra a year. We're already at 100,000, so that's going to be a problem totally. But at this present time in the United States of America, we take in 9,000 Muslim refugees a month. That's a month. When you see the totals of our refugee numbers, you often don't get the 9,000 number because half of them are refugees. The other half are chain migration. And chain migration is the second problem here. The average refugee who comes to this country will bring in another 2.3 people. When they step foot on the soil and they get the green card, they automatically on that day begin to fill out the paperwork to bring the family members. Once the family members get here, the process starts all over again. And so you have this massive influx of people that are coming here, and they're coming here from a war zone, and they're not vetted. And I would point you back to France to show you what that looks like. Those people did not come from a war zone, yet it is a war zone in France. We just had a situation this week, if you're talking about just what's been in the news this week with refugees. Sweden is a mess. We've had over 100,000 Jews flee France, because of the persecution at the hands of Muslims that they're suffering, the anti-Semitism. This has become a problem in Sweden as well. We had several Assyrian businesses, which are Christian businesses that exist in a district next to a heavily Muslim zone. They have been given convert or die orders. That's been sprayed all over their places of business. So this is kind of what we're dealing. We are seeing actual evidence of what this kind of attempted integration looks like in our society. Channel 7, I don't know if any of you saw the Refugees Are Going to Be Great story. And again, I'm referring to Muslim refugees. My father is Catholic, and he runs the refugee program for our church back home. And our church is the biggest Catholic church in the city. It's huge, and they have a very large refugee program. It's almost a part-time job for my dad. So I've grown up with refugee art from all over the world in my home. I've met the refugees. They have been wonderful people. They have been people who desperately wanted to adapt, my father also helps poor Americans as well, and he's still on the phone doing, the social welfare cases 3 years later with them because they haven't adjusted. Meanwhile, a lot of these people who've come in and didn't speak English are not only employed, but they've begun to move up and get promotions. And they've learned English in the year that they've been here. I mean, it's amazing to watch the transition. So it has warmed my heart to see them come to this country over 20 years of my life and really desperately wanting to be American, being awed by being here. And that's just not what we're talking about with these folks. That's just not what we're seeing in Europe. This is not the refugee story that we can all feel warm about and embrace because people love America like we do and just want to be here to be American. This is something entirely different. ISIS has told us what it is. We've gotten the warning, and they're there. I wanted to talk a little bit, though, more broadly about what's going on here in terms of Washington and refugees and illegal immigrants. One of the things I would say to folks is you've probably noticed in recent years that Washington doesn't feel the same anymore. They've always been crooks. They've always been folks on the take. It's always been special interests. Always been lobbyists. Nothing new is under the sun is going on in Washington. But it has a different feel to it now, doesn't it? Can you feel the difference that there's something afoot? And the old partisan lines, Republican versus Democrat, seem to be blurring more than they did before. They used to always have, some liberal Republicans and some conservative Democrats, and somewhere in the middle all that would meet. Now it's different. In Washington, it's got to feel like you're either in or you're out. And it's not even as much about the parties. And what I think we're seeing in Washington has a lot to do with the illegal immigration situation, and it has a lot to do with the refugees, and it has a lot to do with why they want to bring these particular refugees in and are so determined to do it. And that's this. I think we are headed to a one-party system. I think this is what Washington desperately wants. When Thomas Friedman writes for the New York Times, as he has for many years, that China really is the ideal system, that our businessmen go there and they love it because you can just go see one corrupt bureaucrat and get everything done and have all the regulations brushed aside. It's all very neat. And if you even, Steve Wynn, of the Wynn casinos in Vegas, did an interview on this not too long ago where he loves capitalism, he's very conservative, but then he will talk in glowing terms about China and how he wishes it could be like that here because of how easy it is to do business if you're the right person. And so there is an elite mindset right now that you can see in the New York Times. It's been there for many years, but you can also see it in Washington of wanting to have one party. And really you can see them, they're almost on the verge. You can see that they're about to get to that level of one party power. And the reason I think that you see this is because they know they're this close to amnesty. They know they're this close to amnesty. They've read the article in Politico. That was my timer to stop. They've read the article in Politico. They know what happens once 11 million people who vote at least 80% Democrats start to vote, and that means it flips Texas, it flips Georgia. North Carolina goes blue. South Carolina goes purple, eventually with our rate of growth. With our rate of Hispanic growth, it gets to the point where Republicans as a party cannot win nationally anymore. So what do you have then? You have a party. You have the party. You're either in it or you're outside of it. You can see Washington almost grasping for that. They're already acting in a lot of ways like they have the party. And the illegal immigrant votes will give them the party that they want, the ability for big government. When you look at the demographics of who is coming to this country and who we are choosing, if we were to bring in a diverse group of people with many different viewpoints from many different parts of the world that were truly diverse, we would have a different situation. Again, bringing in refugees and bringing in people is not the problem. It's the fact that we don't have diversity in who we're bringing in, and we are bringing them in for one sole purpose, and that is to achieve a political end and a political goal, and that is the goal that I call the party. And that is ultimate totalitarian government power. I think that's what they want, very much resembling China, where you would still have your capitalism and you would still have your middle class if you are part of the party, and you would still have the sort of the semblance of prosperity that we have, but you would also have total totalitarian control, and I think that's what Washington wants, and I think they aim to get it with the illegal immigrants. If you take Politico's numbers, the 11 million, and what would happen if they started to vote, and then you take the numbers from Univision. Univision has a unique problem. Most of their audience is illegal. A lot of it is. They're entirely Spanish television. People rely on them to figure out what's going on because they can't speak English. So they have to determine how big their audience is. They got to figure it out, and they got the problem of, well, some of them are legal and some of them are not. How do we find them? How do we know? We've got to sell this to our advertisers. They came out a couple years ago and said that they estimate the size of the illegal immigrant population at about 20 million people, somewhere between 20 and 25 million people. When I started as a reporter, I got this neat tool called LexisNexis, and it lets you look up all the articles that have ever been written on anything. It's great. And I wanted to know, when did the term 11 million start? Like, when did they start telling us there were 11 million illegal immigrants? How long have there only been 11 million but not one more? The furthest back I could find in a search, illegal immigrant or illegal alien and 11 million, was 1996. That gives you some idea. We're told that 1 million cross our border every year on average. So how many are there? 40 million? So let's put that all together. Let's do the math. Okay, so yay amnesty, we just passed it. Washington is thrilled. They want to get their votes. They want to get them legal and voting as soon as possible. Well, on day one, now we've got 40 million people, and they each get to bring 2.3, approximately. Do the math on that. Maybe my numbers are high. What if it's 20 million? You do the math on that, and it starts to get a bit frightening when you start to think of the loss of the control. Now, when you look at the Pew Hispanic Trust polling on these people, it's fascinating who they are. There's sort of an American mindset of, they're very hardworking, they come here and they're going to be like us. And that simply has not borne out in the Pew Hispanic Trust polling. They're a very liberal think tank, that they have found that in Generation 2, there's a 50% welfare rate still. There's at least use of at least one welfare program in Generation 2. So you're not talking really about continuing with that work ethic and that adopting and that sort of moving up into the middle class strata at all. This is a dependent group of people. Washington knows it. It's really well documented, and it's exactly what they want. There's another interesting thing about people, though, who are coming here from Mexico, Central America, Guatemala, and Honduras, and Pew has documented this as well, and that's this. When you ask the American people, do you want bigger government? No explanation of here, and here's what you get. Just, would you like government to be bigger? You ask the American people this, 43% of Americans will tell you yes. The rest say no. When you ask immigrants, legal and illegal, from Central America that question, 80% say they want bigger government, reflexively. And that is in part, I think, because they come from a culture that does not recognize or value individual freedom, which is the bedrock foundation of Western culture, all culture, and particularly American culture. It's not taught, it's not understood, it's not part of the value system. Theirs is a very collectivist value system. It's a value system of survival at best, but there is no concept of individualism. And so when you come here, and you ask them, would you like bigger government? Why, yes, I would. I got my Medicaid and my welfare check and my food stamps as soon as I came over the border. I would love to have bigger government. There's no concept of the rights of the individual versus the government, or even the fear of the government that we have in this country because we value those things. And so I think this is why Washington has, instead of going for a nice, diverse they say they value diversity, right? The melting pot, we love the diversity. Where's the diversity? You can't see it in the immigrant pool. The one thing everybody in the immigrant pool that we're pulling in, for the most part in this country, has in common, with the exception of maybe some of the skilled labor that's coming in on the B visas, is that they have a rate of voting for Democrats, voting liberal, at 80%. If you look at the Muslim immigrants they want to bring in here now, is this because they want diversity? No. Guess what percentage rate they vote Democrat at? 80. They're just demographically, politically identical to the Hispanic immigrants we're bringing in. They also come from countries where there is no concept of the individual. Worse yet, the individual is less than valued. If you look at Islamic cultures, they are almost all socialistic cultures, culturally. If you look at Islamic cultures, the bedrock of our culture economically is what? Capitalism. Capitalism is almost impossible in a pure Sharia-driven Muslim society because lending, which is the bedrock of capitalism, is forbidden. You can't do it. And so this is why you see so many Muslim countries, economically, their basket cases, if they have wealth, it's from oil. It's because you literally cannot build the business base that we have here, and that is because they're governed under Sharia law. So you have a yet another culture Washington has selected to bring here that does not value the individual, and obstinately, through multiple generations, will not learn or accept that as a bedrock value. And so you're set up for a culture clash. But you're also set up to change the electorate. And I think that's what a lot of this is about. I think it's about substituting voters they don't like with voters that they do. When you see the way that these folks are being brought into the country, red states have gotten far more of the immigrants that have come in two ways. One, the refugees, but two, the Hispanic immigrants, where Department of Homeland Security buses will literally idle at the border waiting for immigrants to show up on the other side of the border and surrender, and then we take them across the rest of the way across the border and we put them in the buses. And then they are brought to states more often than not that are red. The first wave went to blue states. They were more accepting. After that, they began to be brought to red states. So we're starting to see this to come to happen in Spartanburg. All of this, I think, going back to the idea of creating a country, honestly, where there is one party. There is one mindset. I don't know what you call the party. I don't know if it's Democrat. I don't know if it's Republican. Maybe it has no name. Or maybe we just keep the vestiges of the two-party system, but we all know what the fix is. And you can begin to see the fix in Congress now. You know who the people are, if you think about it, who are in the party, and who the people are who are not in the party. And some of them are Democrats and some are Republicans. But they vote for whatever comes down the pike that the leadership wants. Even if it is Obama trade, even if it is fast track for an Obama trade that will let foreign countries decide our visa levels and take them out of the hands of Congress, which they would love. They could flood the country with people who will vote for the party as long as they are given a certain standard of living. And they are selecting these people right now. One of the interesting things Ann Richardson said, she is the one of the assistant secretaries of state, she came here to talk to us about the refugee program, was that 1 out of 5 people on earth actually qualify to be refugees because of poor economic conditions, because of violence, because of war. There are a ton of people who qualify. So ask yourself this: why these refugees then? Why can we only take, what are the growing groups of refugees? Hispanics who come from one culture that is, honestly, for reasons I just explained, sort of an anathema to us, and Muslim. Those are the two biggest refugee, one of them biggest growing, the other one biggest refugee group we're taking in. Why not take in a diverse group of refugees that will balance the country? They won't. They don't. They don't want diversity. They want one mindset. And that's what the aim is in Washington. And that's what all of this fight and this battle is about. That's the bad part of it. The good part of it is there's a lot we can do about this. A lot of people have asked, when various candidates for president on our side of the aisle have said, we got to enforce. What are you going to do? You can't make the refugees, not the refugees. You can't make the illegal immigrants go home, and you can't load them on buses, and you can't do all that. The thing is, you don't need to. You don't. All you got to do is enforce existing federal law. You need no permission from Congress to do that. It's already on the books. If they would like to change federal law and have a public vote about that, where the illegal immigrants stay, then we can all debate that. I'd love to see them do it in front of the American people. They won't. We need a president who will enforce federal law. I want to leave you with this anecdote. That when you hear the idea of, well, we can't load them all back on the buses. My brother-in-law is building a house, and so he had some contractors come out and work on the house, and they decided it wasn't worth their while to finish the work that they had started. And so he needed somebody to finish the work. So he had heard that this guy was a good guy to hire, and so he, knowing nothing about him, he hires him. The guy comes out, does a great job. But he's got like one thing left to do, but he says, hey, listen,
I'm going back to Mexico. I gotta, I'm gonna go back to Mexico, and you don't know if they're legal or illegal. I gotta go back to Mexico, but don't worry, I'll be back in a few weeks to fix it. So my brother-in-law is like, okay, fine. Well, a couple weeks passes, and he's not back. So he calls the guy, because he's got his cell phone, and he says, are you coming back to do the rest of the work? And the guy says, well, I can't, I'm in jail in Mexico. And the guy, and my brother-in-law is like, okay, great. And the guy says, don't worry. Listen, I'm gonna get back across the border. We're gonna pay off the border guard. This is what we do every time, and I'm gonna come right back, and I'll be fine. I'll be fine. So then he's all right. Another week passes, gets another phone call. Well, where are you? Well, unfortunately, they've moved the border guard we usually bribe, and the new one wants more money. But don't worry, we're gonna raise the money, and we'll get there to finish. I'll get there to finish the work. So this idea that they can't get back across the border, we need to put them on a bus and help them somehow. If we enforce federal law, they will leave. I have no problem with, if we need people to do jobs, let's do it above board. I don't think the American people would care if we need workers to bring visas and track the visas, visa exit, visa entry, visa exit. We track them, they go home. We have no problem with that, I don't think, as a country. But it's the sneaking around that the corporations are profiting from illegally. That is a big problem. And so we need to begin to enforce our laws, as the UK was attempting to do before the EU decided to flood them with refugees. When it's just simple, basic things that we could do if we had a president with the courage to enforce our laws. I think the American people would stand behind him or her, and I think they would be able to do it. But if we do not do this, folks, if we do not, we're going to end up with a blue Texas. We're going to end up with no diversity. We're going to end up with one party in Washington. And when that party in Washington knows, you can see how they're acting right now. I mean, right now they're collecting, 95% of your credit card purchases. They're spying. They probably know what I'm saying right now through my phone. They have got my texts. They got my emails. They got everything on me. They're beginning to use it against us. Did you see what they did to Jason Chaffetz? What happens? You want to seek the speakership? Good. The Secret Service leaks something on you. What happens to McCarthy? He wants to seek the speakership. What happens? The Department of Homeland Security is editing his Wikipedia page. How out of control do you think they'd get if they had absolute power, if you're looking at what you're seeing right now? And the goal is absolute power. And absolute power comes on the day that amnesty passes. That's the first step. And the second day it happens is on the day they get that vote. A lot of people say, don't worry, they won't vote for you. So let me tell you, once they get amnesty, they will vote the next time there is a Democrat majority Congress, and there will be one within the decade, usually in America. I would dare say if we get, that we may even see a Congress controlled by one Republican, one body Republican, one Democrat past that, if they can get the votes, because they know in the next election, the entire game changes. And we are rendered voiceless. I'll leave you with this. If there's one party in Washington, and this party is liberal, has the views of Tom Friedman, we'll have a little capitalism, we'll have a little middle class if they think right, but we're going to have total control. If there's one party in Washington, then one party in Washington does all the Supreme Court appointments. What do you think that country will look like? How do you think they'll vote on these privacy issues? How do you think they'll vote on property rights? How do you think they'll vote on guns? How do you think they'll vote on the NSA? How do you think they'll vote on spying? How do you think they'll vote on speech codes, which Justice Kennedy just launched in the gay marriage decision when he put First Amendment on equal footing for the first time with a Fourth Amendment protection he created called the right to self-identity. They are now equal, according to Justice Kennedy, under the law. Well, that's ridiculous. But who says it's ridiculous? Well, whoever votes for the people who appoint the Supreme Court justices. They get to say what is and is not ridiculous. And that's the point of all of this. We certainly should continue our tradition as a country of bringing refugees in, of bringing people into this country, but we need to bring in a diverse set of people who reflect our values, minimally reflect our values. And the folks that we are bringing in, particularly from Syria and from Muslim countries, do not reflect our values. I would leave you with this one last thing. People have texted me when I've been on the air, oh, you're scaremongering, you're fear-mongering, you're talking about France and these Muslims. It's not, we're 300 million, 340 with the illegal immigrants, I don't know. You're fear-mongering. They can't mount an army here. I mean, what are they going to do, Tara? Well, think about it. They don't have to. One Charlie Hebdo-style attack every 3 months, you won't recognize this country. Look what one of those attacks did in France. 7,000 military member strong force patrols the streets of France. What if we had one every 3 months? What would the country look like? So this, to me, is this to me, for me as a voter, and it could, I'm sure is different, could be different for you, but for me as a voter, the most important issue is the illegal immigration issue. That is the one that I am going to be paying the most attention to in this upcoming election, because we got basically one chance left. And if we put a person in there who does the amnesty, they are gonna get the vote, and if they get the vote, it's over. That's where we are in this country, and to me, everything else sort of pales in comparison to what happens if they get the vote, and we discover there's 30 million of them, and they're all going to bring their best friends. It's not going to be a situation that we are going to like. But we have one last chance to set it right in this election, so if I am going to be listening closely to where folks stand on immigration, especially the fine details, because there's a lot of rhetoric being thrown around. You got to look at the way folks have voted in the past. You have to look at the way the things they have done in the past and really be cognizant of that. And we're going to have a huge chance right here in South Carolina to make a difference in that and really have a say in the primary, at least on the Republican side, and that's a good thing. So I'll leave you with that. If there's any questions?
Any questions?
Comments?
Anybody have one?
Dispute?
I can't conceive how these Democrats and the liberals are willing to sacrifice the future safety of their children and grandchildren just to maintain power. I know they want power. I know they're so hungry for it. But I can't believe that they cannot see what this is going to do to their generations to come after them, that they don't care enough for that to matter.
I don't understand it either. I think that you have people in Washington who are beholden to the Chamber of Commerce. They've said they're going to put up $170 million to defeat conservatives in this election. It's their only goal. They've said what their three goals are: a massive increase in the B visas, which, by the way, what the Chamber is saying with that is, we love the wage depression we've seen with these illegal immigrants coming in and the way it's allowed us to violate tax law. We want to do this at the middle income and middle management level. That's their goal. So I think you got those people sort of dictating Washington. I think you've got the American people kind of confused because things aren't the way we are used to them. Republican, conservative, Democrat, liberal, we could figure it out. It's all very confusing. And I think that a lot of these liberal folks really do believe this is going to make a better America. I think they figure, well, we know, Politico knows the Democrat Party will probably become the sole party of the country if they get the illegals, and they think that is going to be great. That's what they think. I think they're deluded. I don't think they're going to like that America, but I think they're going to have to see it to experience it. You mean like the Department of Homeland Security and the Secret Service? Yeah, and this needs to be the election where that happens. I read something really good the other day, speaking about disruption. It was a really great piece by a woman who used to study Soviet era propaganda and has a master's and a doctorate in it, and it was a wonderful piece. I talked about it on the air at 106.3 WORD. And one of the things she said is that the primary purpose of PC is not to empower any group or protect a group or make them feel better. It has nothing to do with any of that. It is to make us afraid to speak to each other frankly at work, frankly at our churches, for fear that someone will be offended by something we might accidentally say. And so it has distanced us from each other. And she pointed out how there's a 40-year survey about trust among Americans individually, and how we have become so much more distrustful of each other, and that was always the goal of Soviet propaganda, to make persons out of people who disagreed. And if you think about it, PC does that too. And so what she said, the takeaway here was, the way you counter that is that you talk to people. You don't let you be afraid. Every one of us has, 20, 30, 40, 50 Facebook friends, maybe more. They're in other states. Some of them may be early voting states. Some of them may be, competitive election, general election states, reach out to those people on Facebook, talk to them, educate them. Put the post up. Don't be afraid to talk about what you think, particularly online, because your ability to influence people is vastly multiplied over what it was even a decade ago. And the real battle here, I think, is going to be fought in this next presidential election on social media. And the really great thing is, you can knock 100 doors and that'll be great. But if you can reach 100 people on social media and really engage them and educate them, that could be just as powerful. And she said you can't underestimate the power of those small connections. So I know that's something I'm definitely going to be working on during this election, and I hope you will too. Any other questions, comments? Thanks. By the way, tune in 6 a.m. to 10, 106.3 WORD. That's me. Hey, here. No, he had, my husband, who is the electoral brain trust back there, could probably tell you. Lower than 38%? Yeah. Yeah, so that I think was the high mark for elections. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much for having us out tonight, and hope you tune into the station 106.3 WORD. Tell all your friends about that too.
Are you going to run for president, vice president, something like that?
What do you mean, of the Pickens GOP?
No, of the U.S.
Oh, I wish.
Thank you. She knows her stuff. Thank you. Now we'll get, excuse me? 6 to 10 every morning, 106.3. Great job. Thank you. The sheriff's projector is not going to work with this Apple computer, so Diane is going to wing it. You can do as best, whatever you.
I didn't know that. Okay. Well, good evening, all. Thank you so much for Philip for inviting us here tonight to talk about this really important issue. It is just amazing to me that this issue is not being covered more. I want to know that we have a flyer that has just kind of one page, both sides, the main bullet points. There is a lot to this issue. A lot of people have done a lot of work on it. And so I wanted to try and get the main points on one page for you. And then if you want more detail, you can get in touch with us. And then there's also a yellow sheet that says what you can do about it. And then there's also an email sheet going around. So if you want to sign up for our emails, and on that yellow sheet, you will see that our Facebook page, which we just started, about 3 weeks ago, Stacy? Facebook page, we have 1,000 likes on it just today. And the last one was Bridget Gabriel's group, Act America, right? So we're starting to gain some steam. The main target in this is Nikki Haley. So on this, I'm just going to kind of go through my slides here. What I have on here is this is the UN State Department refugee industry. And I say industry because it is $1 billion a year business. It is not at all the refugee program that we knew in the 80s, 70s, and 80s where they, truly were persecuted. They were taken care of by churches and by private families. It is a UN State Department industry. There's a lot of things you could say about this refugee program, but we have decided that some of the best words to describe it, if you're talking to people, it's expensive, secretive, risky, and unfair. And I think when I finish tonight, you'll see why we think it is expensive, secretive, risky, and unfair. And you could also add complicated, but we didn't want to I can only retain 4 words. So when you're talking, what's really important is to help educate people about this. Like today, I was at the dentist getting my teeth cleaned, and I started talking to the hygienist. She goes, "Oh, what do you do?" And so I told her a little bit about what I've been working on, and she goes, "Well, that sounds really interesting. Tell me a little more." And as much as I could tell her while I'm getting my teeth cleaned, but she said, "Let me write that down." I told her about the Refugee Resettlement Watch blog website and about our Facebook page, and she truly was interested. She was asking me lots of questions about it. So it's really important that we get the word out, because it's widely reported that the Christians in the Middle East do not go to the UN camps because they are persecuted in those camps. So when we are getting all of our refugees from the UN, we're not going to be getting Christians. We're not going to be helping the truly persecuted, even though there are 350,000 refugees, Christians that had to flee Syria. What we are getting are mostly the Sunni Muslims, anywhere from 95 to 97%. The main instrument in implementing this program is what they call the VOLAGs. VOLAGs is short for voluntary agencies, but there's nothing voluntary about them. What they do is they establish satellite offices throughout the country. They now have 190. They're in 190 cities. We have 2 here in South Carolina. And they are responsible for overseeing resettlement at the local level. All of the people there are getting paid, and they're getting paid by the head. So there is a big incentive to get as many refugees here as possible. There's sometimes we hear that they're even arguing and fighting amongst themselves to get refugees, because the more they can get here, the more money they make. So it's 350 offices in 190 cities. We have one in Columbia that's run by Lutheran Services, something or other, and we also have one in Spartanburg run by World Relief. That's another thing they'll do to trick you. They have these really nice sounding names, like in Tennessee it's Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities is running the whole state. The whole program. They're deciding how many, where they're going. And another thing, when they are if you think, well, they're in Spartanburg, they can place refugees within a 100-mile radius of where the office is. 50-mile radius if they do not have family members anywhere, but if they do have family members in the area, they can go a 100-mile radius. And of course, once they come here, they can move and live wherever they would like to live. But what I have on this slide, and unfortunately you can't see it, but it's the 9 major VOLAGs. World Church Services, Ethiopian Community Development, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. They all have these wonderful sounding names, Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Service. And some of the figures next to these are anywhere from 551 million, which is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, to Church World Services, 46 million. So you can see that this is a big industry and it's a big business. And it's not at all, they're trying to tug on our heartstrings. So of course we want to help people that, are being persecuted. This next one is just a graph showing the spending has gone way up to $1.3 billion for 2014. So the VOLAGs promise a lot of things to these refugees, and of course we're paying for them. They promise them a home, help with rent, health care, nutritious, affordable foods. They promise them English language classes. They help job building skills, computer financial literacy skills. And there are, of course, all of these contractors or subcontractors that own companies that are more than happy to offer these services and be paid by grants through our tax dollars. So you have the 9 major VOLAGs, the ones that are making the 500 to 40 million. Then you have the 350 contractors that are all getting paid, and then you have the private subcontractors that might be a contractor that teaches interviewing skills in English language or something. So a lot of people there's a big incentive to keep this going. They also, of course, get education, social services, legal services. They even get special business loans that you and I probably could not get. They get special incentives for entrepreneurship. Even though this would be such a foreign concept, just adjusting to our country. Can you imagine coming here and starting a business after? So it's just crazy. And they also get matching funds if they're saving for a car or a home. The families can get up to $4,000, dollar for dollar, of our government tax dollars towards that car. Anybody giving you $4,000 towards a car? So they're promised a lot. And how this comes about is the VOLAGs lobby. They have really large lobbying budgets, and they lobby Washington for these benefits. And of course, Obama's really pushing this, and I won't say why I think that might be, but so they have, I think, 14 Democrats, they're calling it the Jihad Caucus, that are pushing Obama. The numbers keep changing. It was supposed to be 10,000 Syrians, then Obama said 65,000. Now we have the Jihad Caucus pushing for 100,000 Syrians wanting to come here to the States. Then they have 18 mayors, Mayor of Chicago, Mayor of Baltimore, 18 different mayors that are also writing letters to Obama pushing for us to bring even more refugees. You also have lots of money in foundation support. Tides Foundation, different Soros ones, Ford, Carnegie, lots of different foundations contributing money also. So when you look at this Syrian tidal wave, you see that 70% of them are male, and they're mostly fighting age males. So, and also many of them are economic migrants and not necessarily refugees. 1/5 of the Syrian refugees think ISIS is a good thing. The German intel says that they have 7,900, they estimate that they have 7,900 jihadists in Germany right now. ISIS claims that they have 4,000 in Europe. I mean, we have no way of knowing these things, but our FBI says that Syrians cannot be vetted due to lack of data, and there's also good evidence that Ethiopian or Somalis, Iraqis, and Afghanistanis would be difficult to vet also. ISIS has promised to exploit this weakness, and Obama is streamlining the vetting process. So another concern is that refugees are in our state for up to 90 days before they get their medical screening done. The medical screening is done by volunteer doctors who may know very little about infectious diseases that are coming from that part of the world. And so they could be here, you know, next to you in a store, whatever, before they get seen. It's going to be 90 days before they get seen. Up to 90 days, could be 30. And the 5 richest Gulf states, I'm sure you've heard this, are not going to accept any refugees because they feel it's too much of a security threat. One of the things I had on that orange sheet was, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going through this kind of fast, and Stacy will go over it a little more too. It's a lot to absorb. We have our Facebook page, there's more up there. The best resource for all of this is Ann Corcoran with Refugee Resettlement Watch. Is anybody, I'm sure John L. is following her, is anybody following Refugee Resettlement Watch? Dan? Okay. That is what you really need to get on, is Ann Corcoran's Refugee Resettlement Watch, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about her. So they're receiving these huge, massive government grants, and then also money from Soros and lots of others. They're working hard to have the communities be receptive to the refugees. So they want the community to adapt to the refugee, not the other way around, and they also want to be dealing with pockets of resistance. We are considered pockets of resistance. Any citizens asking questions are pockets of resistance. So they are hiring groups, they're called welcoming groups. Welcoming America is one here I have on the screen. Welcoming Utah spent $317,000 with several groups like United Way and AARP and American Express, all March of Dimes, giving money to help. They think they're welcoming people, but the task force that Obama came up with this welcoming is actually to decrease any resistance at all. So they will have. They want to soften up the ground with lots of good PR, have media stories go their way, demonize, typical Saul Alinsky tactics, demonize people of resistance. We had an interesting story in Spartanburg. I don't know if too many of you saw it. It was about Mr. Kapasi, and there was a human interest story about him. And since there were some people who were concerned about the refugees coming to Spartanburg, they had this kind of like, it was almost, they didn't use these words, but the story, Christine Scarpelli, I think was her name, almost seemed like it was silly that we should be concerned about this, because these are good folks, and they're going to start businesses, and they're going to assimilate, and they're going to employ people, so this is all good. So they interviewed Mr. Kapasi in his glass store, where he has employed Americans, and he said how much he loves our country and all the right things. It was a beautiful human interest story, as if a refugee coming here from the 80s would have anything to do with today. But that was beside the point. So But they didn't do a Google search on Mr. Kapasi, because it turns out that in 1990s, Mr. Kapasi served time in jail. And he served time in prison because he tried to pay an undercover cop, and it was all on tape, so there's no denying it. He tried to pay him money to have his daughter-in-law killed. She had two little babies at the time. He tried to have her killed because she wanted to wear Western clothing, and she was talking about wanting to work outside the home. And he is their shining example that the media used, and that's the type of tactics that Welcoming America will use to, well, I don't know what you would call, soften the community to the idea of these refugees coming. So it's all done in secret. You don't know who you're getting. We don't know when they're getting them. I asked our sheriff in Greenville. He had no idea that we already had 16 placed in Greenville. No idea. So it's called the Welcoming America Culture Shaping Organizations, supported by the same foundations. So another thing you need to, they're always, you know how they're always playing those word games? The word you need to notice is integration versus assimilation. Integration is the action of incorporating a racial or religious group into a community. So this implies that the community must do the work to change. So we need to integrate them to them. But assimilation is people of different backgrounds come to see themselves as part of a larger national family. So this implies that the work falls on the immigrant to change. So this started over a decade ago, where they started, instead of using the word assimilation, they started using the word integration. And this came from out of the multiculturalists in our universities. And so Obama has actually banned them using the word assimilation. But I think the more accurate term would be colonization. So what does this do? It's, it dilutes American culture. It sucks up welfare resources, creates chaos, division, racial and ethnic tension, cultivates loyal voters to the left, and establishes a progressive permanent majority, just like what Tara was talking about. So what can we do? You have on your sheet, Governor Nikki Haley signed us up for this. We are not a Wilson Fish state, which is a little bit confusing, but Wilson Fish basically means that some states have a situation where they signed up that the VOLAGs would be in control of implementing the refugees. So those states have absolutely no say. They can get as many, the VOLAGs are in complete control. We're in a state where our governor actually does have a say, but she did sign us up for this. So we need to, so the things you can do, need to definitely, Nikki Haley is the main target for this, to help inform her and ask, of course, that we be respectful, but we want to let her know, educate her on this issue. Also, of course, it doesn't hurt to talk to your legislators, your county councils. The county council in Greenville wants to be proactive. They're like, okay, we want to be on this. We want to try and block this. What do we do? Most of the local governments don't like it because it's just sucking up funds, making it harder for them to meet their budgets. And then, of course, sign up for Ann Corcoran's emails and educate your family and friends about the issue, and your dental hygienist and everybody else you can think of. I want to just briefly tell you a little bit about Ann Corcoran, because I'm just so in awe of this lady. 8 years ago, she is a woman, she lives in Maryland. She's been following this issue for 8 years, so we were so lucky that we have someone who has documented all the way through. You can pull up, she has, I don't know, a dozen articles just on what's happened in South Carolina. She's following it for the whole country, and she does this on her own time. Just people have offered to donate, and she says, no, I don't accept donations. She has written a book, which I have on order. So if you get on her site, you can order her book for $6. But so everything is very well documented. She's an excellent writer. She has it really well organized. And you can sign up for her free emails. They're short emails. You'll get them each day. But Ann Corcoran, so 8 years ago, she was living in Western Maryland. It was all Republican area. And they were just dropping off refugees in her area and ignoring them. And she was like, she wanted to know what was going on. And the local media and the newspaper wouldn't investigate it. So she took it upon herself to investigate it. And she and a small group of women demanded a public hearing about this. And they did their homework, and they peppered the officials with their questions. and the whole program was shut down within 10 days. So that was in 2007. So she has encouraged folks to try and get a public hearing after the success of that, and we were unable to get a public hearing. They just don't do public hearings anymore. It's all done behind closed doors in secret with what they call these stakeholder meetings. And the people who are in the stakeholder meetings are the people that are making money that are benefiting from this program. So we wanted a public hearing here, unable to get it, but they sent the Assistant Secretary of State. She had a couple small meetings with various people, but no public, it's not out in the open, and said that like the problems you can run into with this, Manchester, New Hampshire, their school system now has to make accommodations for 80 different languages. So another advantage we have is Trey Gowdy is in charge of the committee that oversees this. He's in charge of the committee for immigration and refugees, and he could hold oversight hearings. He has come out publicly. He's asked for public hearings from the State Department. He's come out and done some things, but we would like him to be much stronger. There's a lot more he could be doing. So if you have a relationship with Trey Gowdy, or you can email him, that would be helpful. Just to give you an idea, we've been really lucky in South Carolina. Some states have just been swamped with refugees. Like, for example, North Carolina, since 2002, has received over 25,000. California has received over 91,000. We in South Carolina only have received 1,730. And part of that reason is they tried to place them in Casey many years ago, and there was a woman who stood up against it, and so they just went elsewhere. Usually if there's some resistance, and now they're calling them pockets of resistance, so when I'm working with other groups across the country, we're working with Tennessee and Virginia, and there's a guy, James Simpson, who is hired, who's kind of working with the grassroots. He just says, I'll call him, he goes, hey, South Carolina pocket, how you doing? So we just call ourselves a pocket. We got the Tennessee pocket, the Virginia pocket. So we only have 1,700, and a lot of that I think is due to that woman a long time ago in Casey who put up a fuss. But now Ann Corcoran says that as much resistance as we have given, normally they would have moved on. And she feels like they've drawn a line in the sand with South Carolina and with Spartanburg. The left likes this because it's votes, and the right likes it because it's cheap labor, especially hotels and meat packing plants. I'm not sure what Nikki has gotten out of this, why she signed us up. I don't know if she just didn't realize or she got something for it. We just don't know. I don't know if you've all heard of Frank Gaffney. He runs the Center for Security Policy, and he has hired Jim Simpson to help organize the grassroots nationally. I was on the phone with Jim Simpson last night. I've been in constant communication with him, people in Virginia, Tennessee, and with Ann Corcoran. And Ann's just amazing. Can you imagine trying to run a whole country of all people from everywhere with questions about their state? So it's just incredible. One quick thing I want to let you know, asylum seekers are not the same as refugees. Asylums, when someone is an asylum seeker, they have to get here on their own money and they have to prove that they are being persecuted. The one thing I want you to look out for is Representative Brian Babin out of Texas. He has a bill that asks for suspension until there is an accountability of the whole program. And there was recent congressional hearings on this. I don't know if it was hearings. What was it? Was it hearings, would you say? Hearings? Okay, I guess that's the right term. It was just like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And Jeff Sessions has been really out front in this. It's been wonderful. So that is the very first time it's hit a national level. Ann Corcoran's website, she's getting 8,000 new readers a week. And she did one 4-minute video, and if you sign the email, I will send you everything you would need. Ann Corcoran's video, the one-page flyer that you have, and also information about our Facebook page. But her video has over 1.7 million views. It's only in 5 months. And she just did a new video this week, and it's fantastic. So if you can find Ann Corcoran's YouTube videos and you start getting her free emails, you'll be able to stay really up to date on this issue. We are just so blessed that to have her helping us through this. So anyway, I think that's everything. I'm sorry I had to kind of wing it without, you didn't get to see the slides. Yes.
At what point do they become permanent residents?
Within a year, they get, well, when they come, they get a Social Security number, and they get Medicaid, and within a year, they get a green card. Yes.
Diane, I really appreciate what y'all are doing here tonight. I'm Don Bowen, as you know.
Yes. Hey,
I've been
Don.
in the House for 8 years. And where are our current elected officials at these things? I've done some research, and I went to Spartanburg and talked to them about the 800 people that they're bringing in up there. But no current elected officials, especially those that reside in Columbia, are going to these meetings. And I think a lot of this stems back in Spartanburg in the research that I did. Going back in the early 60s, a group of Indians were brought into Spartanburg. They were the ones that were displaced by Idi Amin. They were doctors, lawyers, business owners, and they've assimilated relatively well into the Spartanburg community. But this group of people is not that same thing.
And we're not encouraging assimilation at all.
And these people that they're bringing in, this 800 that they want to bring in, are military age and mostly males. And they'll bring in the rest of their family. And in this group of people, we're going to have those radical ISIS-type people that are going to come in. Look up here at Clemson's Stadium. Just think what they can do in a place like that. I work very hard trying to get security officers in the schools to make people have a comfort level. I just don't think that we get the message out, and we need to get all our elected officials involved in this. And I think by being Indian, maybe Nikki Haley has an affinity for people who come into this country.
Yeah, like I said, I have no idea why Nikki Haley signed us up for this. Yes, she can. So it's going to take you all. You contact your elected officials. We are going to be we are working on getting a letter to all 170 of them. We're just, I mean, Stacy and I are only 2 people, and we have a few people helping us, so we can't do it all by ourselves. So we need your help to educate people about this. You've gotten some good information on it. Get it out.
And I have a second part to it. They're talking about a safe zone in Syria. If we're really sincere about helping these people, it would behoove us to help them on their own soil so they can assimilate back into their culture.
Yes, and Stacy's going to address that. She's going to give some solutions of what we think might be some options, like what you mentioned.
What's it going to cost to set up our schools in Arabic now?
Right? There's a ton of costs.
Tremendous expense.
Yes.
Aren't they getting $750 a head for bringing these people in?
Yes, I've heard even more than, I've heard that figure, and I've heard more than that. But I want to make sure Stacy has time to chat, because she has some solutions on this. But I can stay after if you have any questions. And please, you know how to, on your Facebook page, how to hit invite, where you can invite people? Just go down your line and hit invite, and get everybody on the Secure South Carolina Facebook page. It's caught on. There's already a Secure Missouri Facebook page, and we're working with other states sharing ideas. So thank you so much for having me. You want that?
Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. A lot of the information I have is things that Diane has covered, and I'm going to go through some new things a little bit quicker. This program presents a huge potential for corruption. As she had explained, there is several different layers of people who are getting paid to bring refugees here. And as we know, we can equate wasteful spending with about every government program we've ever been exposed to, and this is really no different. It's probably among the most egregious because there's a convoluted money trail, a lack of oversight, and a refusal to respond appropriately to concerns, as she was addressing earlier. When citizens speak out against this or even have valid questions, those lobbyists and those groups who are paid with your tax dollars, their job is to come in and shift the messaging and drive a narrative that says, how dare you ask something like this? Are you so selfish and greedy? Don't you remember that we're a country of immigrants? That's not the point at all. In line with what the contractors are paid, I have some updated figures.
You mentioned, Mr. Bowman, $750 per refugee. So the latest figures show $1,850 per refugee is paid from the State Department, up to $2,200 for each refugee by participating in a Health and Human Services program known as the Matching Grant. And to get this, the voluntary agency only needs to show that it spent $200 and gave away $800 worth of clothing, furniture, cars, etc. All of these expenses are overhead and are paid for by those of us sitting in this room and future generations of Americans. For the refugee program, these voluntary agencies are VOLAGs. They also collect money from federal grant programs, in other words, our tax dollars, such as the Marriage Initiative, the Faith-Based Ownership Society, any sort of local or federal grant they'll go and they'll apply for. The government doesn't publicize the rates of admission by category, so it's not possible to tell if the social group category is more commonly used than the political group. And I'll give you a really stark example of that. Because of the privacy rights that are granted to these asylum seekers or refugees, we have no idea which category the Tsarnaev family came here under, but we certainly know the outcome of their visit. In terms of social and cultural issues that Diane was addressing earlier, the difference between integration and assimilation, it's clear there's no desire on the part of the people that are coming here to assimilate, and our government has made it clear there's no request of them to do that. Once upon a time, immigrants came here and took a lot of pride in being part of our culture, but that's not what's going on right now. The citizens in the communities, as we're seeing in Spartanburg and in Tennessee and in Wichita, Kansas, who also has to pay for 81 interpreters in their public school system, these communities don't have any say in who is brought to their community. There's also a conversation that says that those of us who are opposed to what's going on, that we're greedy, that we don't want to help people, that we're fear-mongering. But the United States has historically accepted more refugees than all other nations combined. Congress can name whatever group it wants to be a refugee or asylum seeker. For example, Chinese, because of the one-child policy in their country, they can come here seeking asylum. And you won't be surprised that Obama has placed a big concentrated effort and attention on those seeking asylum for LBGT issues. I heard the governor of Maine, I believe it is, Paul LePage, said, "You can only pay for what you can afford, and those funds should be going to our most needy citizens in our states." And I couldn't agree more. It's just not fair if we have veterans who don't have a job, who don't have a home, and who may not have health care, that we invite in people that we don't really know and we certainly haven't chosen who we're going to be giving those resources to. Our country and our state and the people in this room are generous and we really want to help. But the amount of centralized decision-making and whom we help, how we help them, and how it impacts our fellow citizens is just not fair. As Diane mentioned, there are Christians overseas that are being persecuted, and truly nonprofit organizations that want to help them and bring them to safety. These are the organizations we feel we should be supporting. In terms of common sense reforms, the gentleman in the front earlier also had mentioned that there's a safe zone in Syria. So what it costs us to bring one refugee here is $20,000 to $30,000 a year. And for that, there's ranging figures from 200 to as many as 500 per year that we could care for, keep safe, and closer to their own community where they could return once the conflict has ended. We feel the United Nations should have no role in choosing these refugees. There are organizations that are doing this, and they're on the ground, and they know which Christians are truly being persecuted. Every resettlement agency must submit to its parent contractor a plan every year. This plan, which is sometimes called an abstract or a P&R abstract, which can be, we can get them from the two organizations, World Relief and the Lutheran Charities. One's in Columbia, and I'm not sure where World Relief is, but these are the two that are in the state. So what these abstracts or plans have are the numbers that they're looking for future years. They've already been chosen for 216. Our state is slated to get 116 refugees. So I'm not sure how we can stop from getting them in 2017. That would be our goal. What we want to do is put pressure on the governor and all other elected officials to stand with us in putting that same pressure. Communities should be included in the process when our neighborhoods are targeted for these refugees. Residents should receive full disclosure about the social and economic impact a certain group will have on our city and town. And this information should be presented in a public forum for the local citizenry to have the option to reject this proposal. And this is one of the things Diane was talking about with a public meeting. And if we can ask our elected officials to do this for us, we will then have a voice. The abstract that I was talking about, it's interesting. There is definitely a skirmish for the money that these refugees bring to bear for these contractors. A small town in Idaho had a group of citizens, not unlike those of us assembled here, that had put in a Freedom of Information Act request for the upcoming year's plan, and their FOIA request was declined. And they said, we can't possibly give you this form yet because it's not yet complete, and if this is disclosed and made public, we would consider that to be releasing our trade secrets. So it's kind of funny, you think, trade secrets, really? This is a taxpayer money. This is our money. It's not theirs. There is some evidence all over the country of elected officials doing things and having an effect. Diane mentioned the woman in Casey, and also the mayor of Athens, Georgia, demanded a plan to have full disclosure and oversight between the State Department, the contractors, the subcontractors, and the local people. And as far as we know, there have been no refugees settled there. The State Department also drives a narrative that says that they have consultations with the local communities before doing that. I guess that's supposed to be what Ann Richards' visit here with 4 people at a time was all about, but I don't think that that really achieved what the citizen was looking for. This is our community. We're the people and the employers of the elected officials and the rightful citizens. The state of South Carolina has the authority to determine its role in the Refugee Resettlement Program and to reject federal regulatory actions that supersede the federal government's constitutional authority and to which the states clearly do not consent. Recently, in a ruling, Chief Justice Roberts stated that the states are sovereign and they should start acting like it. Governor Haley needs to hear from all of us and everybody that reports to her as well. She needs to know that, as the people of the state, our wishes for self-governance will not be ignored. Does anybody have any questions? Philip? Athens, Georgia. Yes. So we talk about, there's a lot of discussion about tactics. We're going to expose this. We're going to talk about what's going on here. What we fail to discuss and plan well oftentimes is a strategy. So part of our strategy is clearly we want it stopped. Also part of the strategy is what's going on now, we want oversight. We want to slow it down because like everything that's going on with the progressives, we can't wait. We have to sign executive orders and executive memoranda, and a citizen has no say. But we have found in other items that we have tried to work with our government on, if you can get them to slow down and put some sunlight on it, that it becomes apparent to both parties at the table that the program shouldn't be going the way it is, and they just sort of back off. We would like to see some combination of that. It also makes it easier for us to message to those who would like to marginalize our voices if we say, look, Just slow it down and let us take a look at how much you're spending, where you're putting them. Do we have the money? How's it going to impact the community? How will it impact our homeless? How will it impact our existing WIC program? How is it going to impact, children's literacy? Can our school systems afford these interpreters? How many languages are we going to need? So the more questions that we can place, the more sense it's going to make. And in terms of what you said earlier, there are a lot of ways that we can embattle this situation and make it, a little less tenable for them to do this. Absolutely. And we're all about driving that in the upcoming legislative session. Yes? Yeah, there's all sorts of options for us to do, all sorts of options. Another narrative that they like to drive is, it's all federal money, it's not really state money. After a short time period, the federal funding goes away, and then it lies on our shoulders and our children's shoulders to take care of this.
Stacy, I think there's something else that needs to be brought up. I talked about it in Duncan at the last meeting. The situation we've got with DSS. The DSS has been under investigation for over 2 years for reasons that they can't do the job they're doing now. And now they're going to be asked to do all this extra dedicated work in social services. Who's going to pay for that?
Well, you and I are.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point. I think we need to be bringing this up to Nikki Haley especially, because she's the one.
Well, oversight at DSS would be a great thing for us to ask for that would be completely unrelated to this, but say, can you really take something else on of this magnitude when you have this going on? We really want, before you do this, we want you to open the books and have complete transparency in what's going on in your organization before we're going to entrust you with the well-being of these refugees. One of the things that I noticed with the group of refugees that were brought to Spartanburg and they're continuing, if you look at the federal grant that World Relief applied for to get these refugees here, they had the most glowing things to say about Spartanburg, why it's a great place to bring them, and it's, immigrant friendly, economic prosperity, super close to Greenville, all these fabulous things. And then you look at the Come Closer Spartanburg website, which is for the local provider, and it says that it's the 5th worst place in the country to live. Most miserable is the term that they use, and like the 5th highest crime rate. And then you think, well, you want to help these poor people. Why are you bringing them someplace so miserable? So it's such doublespeak, and they're so full of vulnerabilities. Yes?
Has the television station run a correction concerning this guy that was not what he claimed to be?
Oddly enough, they don't really want to talk about that.
Well, they need to be forceful. I mean, somehow they need to figure out
we have a plan for that we're working on. Just stand by. Anybody else? Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Let me get this one out real quick.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Is this one on? Hello. No, it's not. Oh, this one will work. Sheriff Clark, that was here earlier, asked me to make this announcement, and we'll be putting it out on social media too. October the 27th at 6 o'clock at Rock Springs in the main auditorium, they're going to do a seminar on church security.
What was the date again?
October the 27th in the main auditorium at Rock Springs Church, church security. They want to make sure that nothing like what happened in Charleston happens again. Make people aware and educate everybody on how to secure their churches and be safe. So that would be something that would be good to attend, I would think. 6 o'clock. No, this is strictly Sheriff Clark. He's put this together himself. Sheriff of Pickens County. All right.
If you want to learn more about this, I had mentioned to you about Ann Corcoran's blog and her book. And then a book that I read on this, James Simpson, the guy who is Frank Gaffney hired to help organize this nationwide. His book is called The Red-Green Axis, The Erasing of America, and it's, I don't know, I think it's like $5 or $6 on Amazon, and it's only 60 pages, and it's widely spaced, so, I mean, I could only read a few pages, and I had to walk away because it was that disturbing, but it is a quick read. If you can get through it, it's really fast. And there was a lot of great information. It's the James Simpson, The Red-Green Axis. I forgot to tell you about that.
Let's give these ladies a hand. Diane and Stacy are tireless in their efforts for the community and forever doing something and involved in everything going on